Welcome to LOA Today. Walt and life coach Linda Armstrong here. Today is Friday, September the 21st, 2018, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, your second daily dose of happy for the day. And we are happy that the week has come to an end, even if it's a little bit gray here in the northeastern part of the United States. But it was comfortable enough, Linda. I was able to get out for my daily walk. That was really great. And so even though it was a little bit on the gray side, that's okay. As long as I'm able to get out and do stuff, that's really all that matters,
Yeah.
That's really the most important thing. So how are you doing? I mean, we haven't talked in a week, but how's it been going for you?
Pretty good. Things are usually pretty busy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, good. Well, staying busy can be good. I'm always reminded that I need to get myself into that good vibration place before I do anything, because otherwise I just become a human doing instead of a human being. But nevertheless, it's great to have good stuff to do. No doubt about that.
Right. Yeah.
We decided we were going to talk about a topic that you had just posted about minutes ago, I guess, on Facebook. And the topic, interesting phrasing, living in the Matrix. I mean, it made me wonder, are we talking about the movie? Are we talking about Mike Dooley's Matrix? I mean, there's a lot of different matrices out there, but it could be any of them, really.
We're talking about the concept of the movie.
The concept of the movie, okay.
How real is that? Is that actually what we're living? It could be.
So in other words, we actually could be living in a computer program.
Yeah.
Well, that is a little scary.
Think of this. Your subconscious mind is running the show. Now that's just information that's somehow programmed in there, right? That I know I work with people to clear it out and to reprogram it. So, you take it a little bit further. Like, you know what? I think what I talk about in my video too, when I start out with it, is that, even before I got into all of this stuff, remember the movie Men in Black?
Yeah.
And the cat had the galaxy hanging from its collar.
Kind of.
Galaxy.
I
remember that?
I didn't watch the movie. I remember the previews. I rember the talk, but I don't know the details of the movie.
Okay.
So.
Well, yeah, I don't know if I remember. I couldn't really tell you too much about the movie exactly, but I think near the end you realize that this cat has this galaxy dangling from its collar, like a whole galaxy. Like, who's to say we're not somebody's little experiment too? Then we could be in that little tiny thing hanging on some cat somewhere. You know what I mean?
So sort of
who's to say what it is?
So sort of like Douglas Adams, because Douglas Adams wrote a trilogy of books about starting off with the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and one of the main themes was that the planet Earth was really just a hired experiment that was created by a bunch of lab mice.
Yeah.
And here we are inside the lab that was created by the lab mice.
Yeah, maybe. But you know what? There's actual science behind this that I could not even begin to quote for you. But if you search it, is that this life a simulation? Are we living in the Matrix? You're going to pull stuff up that's going to talk about why, maybe it's the quantum physicians, however you say that word, that are discovering this more and more, this possibility. And I think they also refer to like that double slit experiment. Do you know about that?
I remember.
Where they shoot the particles through the holes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But as soon as they put something in the room that is observing it, it changes.
Right. That's the observer effect.
Yeah.
Right.
So, maybe that applies to all of this too, right? Because really, when you get into all this stuff about how the outer reflects the inner, and everything in our existence is something that's within us. It's kind of like our life is a projector of what's running within us, which we could say this body, which could, I'm telling you, I get this.
Well, I did do a little quick lookup while you were talking there just to see, and it turns out that, to my surprise, Elon Musk, the owner of the company that makes Tesla, believes we're living in the Matrix.
Yeah.
Okay.
I did see some of his stuff. And you know how he shows that, though, is because if you look at, and I think I even mentioned this a little bit in my video. I mean, think about the things that we do now that, 100 years ago would have been unheard of, impossible. So I think in Elon Musk's talk, I only saw a few minutes of it. He's talking about virtual reality and how close we are to actually maybe discovering that we are all in a virtual reality. Like things are going to be so easy to just become a part of. It would be interesting if anybody's really into this topic we're talking about now to look up some of that stuff and see how he put that concept forward, because it does make sense.
Well, certainly virtual reality is a growing field, and I'm not really sure that it's grown to the point now where somebody is capable of putting together a virtual reality world, and everybody's living in that virtual reality world, plugged in like they are in the 3 Matrix movies. I guess I can't rule anything out, because apparently the people who live in that dystopian society don't realize they're living in a dystopian society. So anything's possible, I suppose. All I know is that I think all that kind of stuff is fun science fiction. I'm not sure I really buy into it in terms of it being fact, but I do agree that, and this is definitely more philosophy than science, that the precepts of quantum physics certainly lend themselves to the idea that our thought processes are what create things. And that is a fundamental portion of law of attraction belief systems.
Right. So it's like that. So what is that? Where did they come from? How are they, you know what I mean?
Where did they come from? What do you mean? Who are they?
The thoughts that become the things. Like, where's that programming coming from, you know?
I'm not so sure that it's programming, but certainly there is plenty of evidence to suggest that the universe and that physical matter is not what it seems to be on the surface. And that does lead to all kinds of abilities to speculate about, well, so what are the explanations? How does this universe actually work? What is the driving force behind it? You know, how was it created? Who created it? And you know, at that point, we are in the realm of science fiction at that point, because nobody really knows for sure. But one person's belief can be just as good as another person's belief. Now, personally, for myself, the thing that really excites me, I mean, you mentioned the 2-slit experiment or the observer effect, and the observer effect is really interesting, because the observer effect basically undermines a basic fundamental tenet of science, which is that there is such a thing as objective fact. But the moment you have an observer effect, you've basically disproven the idea of an objective fact. There is no objective fact if an observer can change the fact. Now it's subjective to whoever's looking at it.
Right. And that kind of backs up what I will say is that we are these amazing energy artists who can create anything. Now, 2 things came to my mind. One thing is that, you know, in the spirituality world, I totally get it. For me, it's real that, okay, we have all these different lifetimes, which supposedly all happen at the same time, because time only exists in our reality, but in spirit, it's all happening at the same time, right? So you can have all these different lifetimes, and I know I talk about jumping through time at times, but if we have this pre-birth planning thing, and we're with our soul family, and we decide who's going to be our parents, who's going to be my abuser, who's going to be my teacher, all this stuff, you're writing the program for the life that you're coming here to live.
Yeah, you can make a good case for that. I mean, I'm not sure I've totally bought into the idea of, what do they call them, sacred contracts and so forth, but I can certainly see the validity of the idea. I mean, it's a very reasonable hypothesis to come to, let's put it that way. And certainly, I'm sorry, I was just going to say that certainly a number of people who claim the ability to interact with the non-physical and to exchange messages and exchange information and so forth, a number of such people have claimed exactly that we are people who come to this plane of existence, so to speak, with a pre-existing contract of sorts in place, so that we've already agreed what it is that's going to go on here and what we're going to be doing. And personally, I find that a little bit freaky, but hey, there are a lot of people who believe that.
For me, I believe it. To me, it's true, because when I work with people, and one of the way you release some of the resistance and the resentment and these different things that hold you back in life is to find the purpose for this experience that caused you whatever this pain might be. So when people find the purpose of it and they see what they gained from it, then the energy is released and they feel like entirely different. because now there's some understanding about why they might have lived that experience. I know I explained this before with the little girl who passed away from a brain tumor.
Right.
But so then it goes to having, writing the program of this life and what you want to grow out of the experience that you're living. Now, I'll tell you something else that we can kind of put in here a little bit is, are you familiar with the book Biology of Belief by Bruce Lipton?
Yes.
Okay. So you remember how he talks about how they looked into the smallest of atoms and, down to the very, very, as far as they can go, and they look inside it and there's nothing there? That matter is made out of nothing? Well, what does that indicate to you?
Well, he's also taking a little bit of a liberty there, to be perfectly honest, because it's not like they're actually able to see inside of an atom. They can create a visualization, a computer visualization of what it's like inside of an atom, but they can't actually physically see inside an atom. So there's a little bit of a liberty being taken there. We have good equipment, don't get me wrong. Electron microscopes and so forth can do really cool stuff, but there are limits to how far they can go.
They did break it down, going deeper and deeper into whatever it was they're looking at.
Oh, yeah.
And then they come to a point where they can't see anything anymore. But
And the question at that point becomes, is it really there? And it's a valid question, because theoretically, physicists have been able to observe effects at the subatomic level in a theoretical way. They can't necessarily see it with their eyes, but theoretically and through indirect testing, they can come to certain conclusions. And you're right. One of the conclusions they come to is sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not there. And that could be a little freaky.
Right. So then that can bring us back to the observer thing, right? It's only there if we see it to be there. Like you can close your eyes and have one reality, but who's to say you don't open it and see a whole different reality somewhere else? And
one of the most fascinating phenomena, and I may be misrepresenting it, but I think it's fairly accurate. It is possible, depending on how you set up your subatomic experiment, so to speak, for an electron to be in two places at once. And that alone gets my attention enough to say, this universe is not what we think it is. Because in theory, no thing can be in two places at one time. But they have been able to demonstrate that an electron can be in two places at once. That pretty much upsets most of the logical foundation of rational science.
Yeah. You know what? I wish I had my husband next to me, because there's this other study, and maybe you know of it, or
well, I'm just an amateur, really. I'm not an expert at all. I've done some reading, so your husband may know more than me. I
wish I could remember this, but I think if they'd taken cells and split them and put some cells like in this one location and others like on the other side of the world or whatever, and they do some test or some experiment with the cells that are in their physical experience here, the ones all the way over wherever they were having the same experience.
Yeah, there have been a number of experiments like that are really wild. No doubt about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So where does that come from?
Well,
that comes from living in the Matrix, baby.
It's all programmed, folks. It's all programmed. So, but actually, one of the more mundane things that I really like, that I think demonstrates that what we think is what's going on is actually not what's really going on, is when you just look at the science that is being done and has been done in terms of understanding how the human body works. And one of my favorite things to point at, my sister-in-law explained this to me. She's been pursuing a degree, a PhD in the neurosciences for a few years now, and I think she's getting closer. I'm not sure if she's actually there yet. But early on, a number of years ago, in the early years of this podcast, she and I talked about some of the stuff that she discovered in the course of her research. And one of the things that she told me about is that because of all the advances that have been made in terms of being able to visualize the body through, X-rays and what do you call it? I'm drawing a blank. The
MRI?
MRI, yeah, all that kind of thing. Yeah, all the different, and there are a lot more than that. Because of all the different ways they can visualize the human body, it is now possible for a researcher, at least in theory, in practice they'd have to have all the equipment in one place. But in theory, they could actually track and watch a thought being created. They can actually see it happening. They can see it firing the neurons, and they can trace the path of the circuit through the neurons to the various points in the body. And depending on what the circumstances are, there are variances in this. Sometimes a signal can get through pretty quickly, but there are other times it can take 2 or 3 seconds for a signal to get through. So as an example, if you stub your toe, it can take 2 or 3 seconds for that fact to reach your brain, but you can feel the pain instantly.
Yeah.
And that's really bizarre. Now, they will also point out that it is possible for a pain signal to get through quicker than the 2 to 3 seconds. I think they measure it in 0.3 of a second or something like that. But from our perspective, it's instantaneous. There's no delay at all. So it raises an interesting question, doesn't it? Which is, how do we feel the pain if it isn't getting to the brain that quickly?
Right. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
I was doing a search on this, on my title of my video, which is, do you ever wonder if you're living in the Matrix? There's so many articles there. I don't want to click on them because they might load some kind of, how these things autoplay with audio and it'll get in the way.
Oh, right.
Yeah. But what you're talking about right now, I had actually watched a quickie little clip of a TED Talk where a guy is speaking to the science behind that we're living in a matrix, and he's referring to the brain and the way the messaging gets around. He's pretty much talking about kind of what you were just talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating about it is it isn't just that there's a signal going through, because there are also neurotransmitters firing or actually transmitting information that gets further transmitted through the firing of neurons. In other words, the whole system works together to send messaging along. And because of the complexity of that system, that's one of the reasons it takes a while for a signal to get through. So if the signal is not actually matching the physical experience, like for instance, we know with world-class athletes that a world-class athlete can respond so quickly to some kind of sporting event circumstance that it's faster than the eye can perceive. How do they do that if the body isn't able to respond that way, that quickly neurologically? And so the answer has to be that there is communication going on in some way outside of the nervous system, whatever outside means. Maybe it means physically outside. Maybe it means something else that I don't even know what it is. But in one way or another, these kinds of mental connections are being made beyond the nervous system. And that leads to all kinds of interesting speculation. Like, for instance, does it go on truly outside the body? Maybe that's what the aura is. I mean, there are lots of people who pay attention to auras, and the fact that auras can now be scanned. You can actually get a picture of an aura and so forth.
Oh, yeah.
So is it possible that the aura is where that transmission is taking place? If that's true, then now we're starting to feed into the basic law of attraction concept that most of us hold, that we are all one. We're all part of the same energy field. Well, maybe that's tapping into that energy field. Maybe the energy field is where the communication is really going on, even though it seems like it's going on in our nervous system. Yeah,
for sure. We are all one, and that's why the energy of love heals, even for these horrible things, because, and it goes to the outside reflecting the inner again, because even that person who may have done that horrible thing, there's a part of that somewhere within you, or that wouldn't show up in your reality in any way, shape, or form, because it's not part of the programming. So again, it goes into this whole thing with how we're programmed.
So let me ask you something, because you're heavily emphasizing the programming side. Where does spontaneous creativity fit into it?
Maybe it's part of the program.
You think the creativity is programmed? Doesn't that kind of defy the definition of creativity, though? I mean, creativity is creative. You never know exactly where it's going to go. It can go almost anywhere.
Well, we don't know how intelligent this technology is. That is our simulation, if it is a simulation. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's like so many open questions. So that, I guess ultimately it boils down to just loving every aspect of your life and living, because to me, it always gets back to whatever things that come up that put you off or put you out of your peaceful place, is something that is reflecting what is inside of you. And so the best way to heal that always is through this energy of love. Mm-hmm. So we could decide not to worry about any of this stuff and just decide to live our lives through this energy of love, which spreads out to everything. And that's how we can heal the whole entire planet. So.
Well, that's very ambitious. Very ambitious.
Yeah.
I like it, but it's ambitious. That's good, you know.
Well,
And I'm not even sure there has to be a pre-programming in order to have that kind of, I'll call it communication taking place. I think that can happen without programming too. But, whether or not there's programming or not, I do like, and it does appeal to me, this idea of not only are we one, but we're also individuals. We're both individuals and we're one at the same time. And in that context, so to speak, we do regularly communicate through this alternate, when I say alternate, alternative to the physical world, alternate way of communicating it. That is through source energy. And that does appeal to me. It appeals to me on a visceral level. It appeals to me on a very, very deep level too. It's like and when I get that kind of feeling, that tells me I'm onto something. Like, there's a real thing there. I don't necessarily know what that thing is, but yeah, I'm onto something.
But who's to say that what we're talking about being a computer program or whatever isn't just something that we don't have words for, that is created by the ultimate computer, which maybe is God. You know what I mean? And like when I talked about the energy of love spreading like wildflower kind of thing, look how fast negative energy spreads. You ever notice that? How fast negative energy spreads? Well, love can do the same thing. Are you still there?
I'm still there. I'm hesitating because I'm trying to think, how do I want to respond to that? I believe that there's no such thing as positive or negative energy. I believe there's just energy.
Right. So if what we feel doesn't feel good to us, kind of energy.
Right. Then, so it's a particular energy in a particular context that we don't like, and so we call it negative. And in that sense, sure.
And you know how fast that spreads. So why would we ever think the other one doesn't spread just as fast, especially if we take your argument that it's all the same?
Yeah, it really is all the same. It's just we have different value judgments for different aspects of it. You know, I like this one, I don't like that one, which is okay. You know, that's part of why we come here, so that we can have those judgments. We can have those decisions about what we prefer and what we don't prefer. And that's good. That's part of what makes life interesting. That's part of what makes the contrast. In fact, without that contrast, it wouldn't be a whole lot of fun. Which is really also a rather weird thing, because now we're talking about having things happen that we don't like, and that makes it fun. But it's true. That tends to be what happens. As I think about this stuff, what I notice is that the concept of energy. I mean, you referred to God. You said that, well, maybe the big program is God and so forth. I've throughout my life, I've always had this big doubt thing about the God concept. Not that I don't think there's such thing as source energy, or that we're all made up of it, and that the source energy is large and has, all kinds of amazing aspects to it. And I guess one could describe God as being like the head of that source energy, so to speak. But I just have some doubts about whether that's actually an accurate model. And God is one of those concepts that, I mean, I mentioned earlier how certain things like source energy, we're all one, we're all individuals, that resonates inside for me. God doesn't resonate for me inside as a concept. Every time I've heard that, I said, it just doesn't feel right. It just doesn't feel right.
And we all have free will, and we all have our own innate creativity. So we can all decide what that means. For me, I used to have trouble with that word. It was easier for me to say the universe or source, or then I think I graduated to creator. Now I finally get it, this God thing. It's only because of the way it was given to me through all this religious stuff to make you feel bad about everything.
Oh, sure, yeah. A great way to control people, right? Control the gates to heaven.
And so that part of it, which people had free will to promote it that way and share it that way, and those who chose to subscribe to that chose. So I understand when you say that, because I used to have a really hard time with that word. But now for me, that word, it just means this love that's in all of us that connects us all together. Mm-hmm. And quite possibly there's just a greater source of it that has more insight than the parts of it, which are us out here.
Quite possibly.
Or down here, or wherever here is. But you know what? I just got a comment on the video that I posted just before the show.
Yeah.
And this guy says, are we living in a matrix with a question mark? This is a perspective that I never thought of. Wow. Some great contact. Subscriber number 309. So
all right. There you go.
So, crazy concepts, but who's to say it's crazy? I mean, really, if you think about a lot of this stuff that we take for granted now, like hopping on airplanes and that, people thought that was crazy.
Oh, that's true.
Electricity.
If man were meant to fly, he'd have wings.
Right. Yeah. Oh, even the way the computers work now, right?
Oh, yeah.
And the virtual reality, we're like so close because there are virtual reality experiences where you can put on the eyes and feel like you're in the game.
Oh, yeah.
So it's just taking it to another step. And we never thought we'd have that step.
Well, also, I mean, they took a phrase, virtual reality, and they applied it to different tools that were being developed that enable you to imagine or visualize as if you were living in a real world when actually you're interacting with a computer. So that's where this concept of virtual reality comes from. But it's also a phrase that's being used and applied in a lot of different ways. Virtual reality today has many different meanings depending on what technologies you're talking about. I mean, they all kind of have in common the idea of replicating, quote, real world, unquote, stuff. And that's the similarity, but the differences are enormous in terms of, how they play out. Like, for instance, a lot of medical scanners of various kinds are in many ways virtual reality. But they don't think of it as, well, you put goggles on and you're interacting with an environment where you're playing, Star Wars or something.
Yeah.
They think of it in terms of, okay, let's create an image of the human body and we'll make it a video image. And when we interact with it, we'll expect to get the same kinds of responses as if we were actually interacting with the body. Well, that is a form of virtual reality when you think about it.
Yeah.
And there's lots of different examples of that too.
I mean, what about all these robotic parts that people can have now in their bodies? I mean, who would ever thought that would come around?
You mean like replacement hips and so forth?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Legs, arms.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't they do I don't know. I saw something recently, a face transplant, like, remember that Face Off movie?
Yeah.
That was.
Well, there are people who have had real face transplants, and they've been horribly disfigured in accidents or something like that. So for them, it's very serious. It's very important for them that
right.
We live in a society, like it or not, where if you don't look even somewhat close to everybody else, you're a freak. And so for somebody who's in that spot, having the ability to get a face transplant so that your face can look more like a normal human face, that's a really big deal for people.
Yeah. I'm going to click on this article. I hope it doesn't make noise.
Yeah, well, if it does, we'll live with it. That's all right.
All right, because how these ads will be all over the side of stuff when you start playing. So, because it says, do we live in the Matrix? Scientists believe they may have answered the question.
By the way, those ads, they're another form of virtual reality, just a different kind. It's the virtual reality of people who are advertising stuff in the belief that a significant number of people who see it are going to respond to it and buy something, which is, when you actually look at the numbers, the percentage is so small that it's ridiculous. But that's not the way they think about it. And I know I've been one of those people. When you're thinking about it, you're thinking about all these people who are seeing it, and like this large chunk of them are going to buy whatever it is I have to sell. Well, you're working in the world of virtual reality there.
You know what? I just have to get off the page when they come on. It puts me off totally.
In fact, just before we were doing the podcast today, I was actually working on a video promo for the podcast that I'm going to put on social media. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. A little 15-second ad. So, watch for it. Coming to a Facebook page near you.
All right. Awesome. Okay. So that's virtual, Are there any callers, any people there who want to chime in with what this crazy concept? No.
We haven't had anybody directly contact us through the Zoom platform, and I don't see anybody trying to reach us through speakers. So I'd have to say no. We don't have anybody actually directly trying to interact with us right now.
I mean, this would really be a fun topic to have.
Yeah, sure. I mean, people want to call in. Probably the easiest thing, if you're listening live and you're listening within the United States, there's a phone number you can call, and that phone number is area code 646-876-9923. And then the access code that gets you into our little conversation here is 860-264-5432, followed by the pound sign. And all that is on the homepage. In case you didn't remember it while I was reading it to you right there, it's on the homepage of our website at loatoday.net. But we'd love to have you join in if you're listening in right now. Feel free to call in. Share your perspective. What do you think? Are we crazy? Sometimes I think we are. You never know.
Who's to say what's crazy? I mean, a lot of these people who maybe are considered crazy, or are they really crazy? Or are they just tuning into stuff that is there that other people can't hear?
Can't hear or can't interact with or interact with differently?
That's right.
Yeah.
Or cannot perceive. Their perception isn't as open. They're not, it's like just psychic abilities on, hyperspeed.
I can't remember what the woman's name is, but she's autistic. And she's currently a professor at a Western, a university in Western America. I can't remember exactly where she is. And she has a degree, I believe, in animal husbandry because, she has developed a number of ways to more, humanely handle animals such as cattle and so forth that feed our food supply. And I'm drawing a blank on what her name is, but there was a movie that was done that basically demonstrates how the world looks to her from her autistic viewpoint. And it's really, really fascinating. Like one of the things is when she was a relatively young girl, she went to visit her aunt and uncle at their ranch they lived in Arizona, something like that. I can't remember exactly where they were. And she gets up to, how a ranch will tend to have a swinging gate for the trucks to come through, or, if the tractor's pulling something, whatever, they need to have a big gate. You can't have a small driveway like you can with a suburban house. Well, when she saw the gate and she saw it swinging open, the way they presented it on screen was she saw the swinging gate, but she also saw it in terms of it having a blueprint type diagram on top of it, and as the gate would swing, the angle would increase in its number, the number of degrees that the gate is open, and she was seeing it like this moving blueprint type diagram. And I'm thinking, what a fascinating representation! I mean, if that's what she really sees, she has a completely different experience of a swinging gate from the rest of us. Talk about virtual reality.
Well, what about the what are they called? Idiot savant. What is it, Forrest Gump, or they have a whole different reality too. Like these super smart people who can figure certain things and see like numbers in a way that are not like the way we see numbers. Or, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So that's a perception. So maybe their programming enables them to have this more developed, sense. Right?
By the way, the person I was trying to think of, I had to look her up because it was just driving me nuts. Her name is Temple Grandin. And in fact, there's a movie about her. She's an American professor of animal science at Colorado State University. So I got the details generally right. I just couldn't remember the specific details of it.
Okay.
But there's a movie about her, and I think it's just called Temple Grandin. I can't remember for sure. But fascinating movie. Really, really interesting movie because, among other things, it depicts what it's like both for the autistic person and, in this case, also for the autistic person's mother, and trying to interact with her own daughter and dealing with all of the craziness from the point of view of us, quote, normal people, unquote, who are trying to understand how to deal with autistic people. It really demonstrates not only that struggle that her mother had to go through and that she had to go through with her mother, trying to interact with each other and to help her learn how to interact with society as a whole. Not only was that part interesting, but also it was fascinating as toward the end of the movie, they had Temple herself interacting with a group of people at a conference for parents of autistic children trying to deal with autistic children. And somebody's giving some talk on it, and Temple stands up and says, well, I know such and such and so. And the call from the audience says, oh, why? Are you a doctor who knows autism? She says, no. And everybody says, oh, great. And she says, no, I am autistic. And everybody's head in the room shoots over to her like, oh, my God, there's an autistic person who can talk to us, who can explain things to us, because in their experience, their own kids can't even talk to them. They don't know what's going on in their kids' heads. And so here, this person who has autism could actually go up in front of the room, take a microphone, and explain to them what their kids are experiencing and what's going on in their heads and how to interact with them and so forth. I mean, this movie is really a powerful movie. It truly is.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's pretty amazing. I mean, there are these people who have special gifts that we can't make sense of.
Yeah.
Right? So...
And we learn things along the way, particularly, that's what this kind of a movie is about. It helps us learn a whole lot that we didn't know before. Information that's being brought to us by someone who, like you said, has a gift that we didn't know about, that we didn't know even how to interact with it.
Right.
Which is very cool. Really something.
Yeah.
And by the way, she's done some amazing things. She actually invented a method of slaughtering cattle that was more humane. It was so humane that the cattle who were normally used to, well, not used to, but when the cattle were slaughtered, they were terrified because they could see everything that was going on. She invented a method that they never even knew what was going on. And from their perspective, all that happened is one moment they're alive and the next moment the light turned off. That was it.
Yeah.
They're like, wow.
Wow. And
remarkable.
that's so much better for, those of us who eat the meat because, if most of these animals are in extreme fear, let alone maybe not even treated well the whole time. And that energy, you're eating that energy.
Talk about that for a minute, because that is a very that is a very typical theory among people who explore the realm of the metaphysical, that when we're eating food, we're actually eating energy. Now, science will support that to the extent that food is how we are able to generate energy to do what we do within our bodies. But in the metaphysical realm, it usually means more than that, doesn't it?
Well, yeah. I mean, because everything is energy. So, like if you think back, I don't know, I haven't lived this life, but I think the Native Americans would have a whole ceremony around the animal that was killed for the food, and they bless that food. And there's a whole energetic component to the gratefulness for the food. Whereas, now I don't even my stomach can't even handle finding out how these animals are treated, that we're actually most times eating.
Well, the good news is that they're being treated better and better, because one of the things that came out of Temple Grandin's situation is that I think it's now a majority of all cattle farms around the country use her methods now, which is
that's great.
Which is really something. Yeah.
Yeah. Because really that energy, that fear or that whatever that animal might have experienced, it's still there. And so, and plus I think even if you go into the science of it, the things that are, I guess, I don't know if it's adrenaline or whatever else might be rushing through them at that time that is not good for the meat that we're eating, has an effect on it too. I don't know if you've ever heard of that kind of stuff. Well,
I've heard a lot of different postulates put out there. I'm not sure that I can itemize them, but there are a lot of theories, that's for sure. I was curious to know what ones you knew about, but yeah, there are a lot of them for sure.
So that's why, and I don't always remember, but I'm getting better and better at it, to really blessing the food that I eat, and so asking for this blessing, this love to come and honor this animal that's giving me this opportunity to eat.
And there's also another advantage to each of us to do something like that, because what's the basic foundational principle of law of attraction and being a deliberate creator? Well, one of those foundational principles is to lean into and rely upon the positive emotions, and one of the best ones to lean into is appreciation and gratitude. Well, that lines up perfectly with, like you said, many Native American tribes very much were interested in appreciating the animal that was killed so that they could eat. Well, so that actually has a double purpose there, doesn't it? It has not only the purpose of appreciating the animal, but it also has the purpose of raising our own vibration. That's a good thing. That's a win-win.
Yeah. It's you just have to implement it and get used to it, because blessing your food is just bringing love to it, which can only enhance it.
Now that raises another interesting question, because you've referred to it indirectly, but let's go at it directly. What is the connection between love and energy? I think we would probably both agree that they're really two words for the same thing. I mean, love is energy, energy is love. I mean, you agree with that?
Yeah, you crack me up, Walt. I still haven't wrapped my brain around your thing with energy.
Well, I try
let's
to
talk about vibration, right?
Yeah.
It's a higher vibration. So maybe you say there's no negative and no positive, but can you see that there is a higher vibration and a lower vibration?
Well, interesting story I can tell you about that before I answer your question.
Okay.
When I was in my 20s, right after I left college, for a short period of time, I went back home. And back home was a kind of a weird thing because I grew up in Schenectady, New York. But when I got out of school, my family had moved to Connecticut, to Monroe, Connecticut. And so I spent a short time with them in Monroe, Connecticut before I branched off on my own. During that time that I was there was a family that lived just down the street. And I was a musician. I was playing in bands and so forth. I was a guitarist. And they had caught wind of the fact that I played guitar, probably because I played my guitar and they could hear me playing the guitar. So anyway, this young man's mother comes up to our door one day and rings the doorbell, and my mom answers the door and says, it's for me. And so I said, oh, okay. So, I go to the door and there's this woman there. She says, hi, I hear you're playing the guitar. I was wondering if you could help my son Richie out. I said, well, what do you mean? And she says, well, he's been taking guitar lessons for a number of years now, but he has so much trouble progressing. He hasn't gotten very far with it. And it doesn't seem to matter. He's been through a number of different teachers. It doesn't matter which teacher he has. He doesn't seem to make any progress. So I was wondering if maybe you could give him some lessons or something. Now, I'd never given guitar lessons in my life. I'd taken guitar lessons, but I'd never given them. And I was kind of a little hesitant at first. But she was pleading me so much, I said, well, no, geez, how can I turn her down? And so we negotiated a rate. I said, all right, well, let's try it for a few weeks to see what happens. First lesson, he comes over to the house, and I say, okay, well, why don't you show me what you can play? And so he starts trying, and I'll emphasize the word trying to play a tune on the guitar. And it was horrible. It was horrible to even listen to. And I can even describe to you technically why it was horrible. I mean, anybody who's seen somebody play a guitar with a pick in their hands, picking the strings, imagine if you were holding onto that pick and you were pounding the strings with the pick. That's what he was doing. His hand was so stiff and so firm that he couldn't actually pick the strings. It was like he was attacking them. Okay. Seriously, it was like that. And on top of that, the tuning was really bad. He had not tuned the guitar well, didn't understand tuning. And on my initial read and based on conversation I had with him, apparently his previous teachers had come to the conclusion that he was tone deaf. Well, that doesn't really help when you're trying to learn how to play a guitar.
Right.
But I talked to him some more, and as I was talking to him, I began to realize there were some inconsistencies between what his teachers had diagnosed and what I was seeing. So I said, okay, let's just stop. So I had him put the guitar down. We went into the other room where there was an upright piano. We sat down at the piano, and I said, have you ever sat down at a piano? No, he hadn't. Okay. Do you understand how a piano is laid out? No, he doesn't. Okay. Well, here it is. It's basically, you know something about musical theory, and he did know a little bit. So I said, okay, you've heard of scales, right? You've heard of A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And he kind of halfway gave in that he had heard of that, but he didn't really understand it. I said, okay, well, and I pointed on the note, on the keyboard, it's A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then it repeats and repeats and repeats and repeats. And he says, okay. And I said, now, one of the things that I was noticing is that your pitch, your idea of pitch is a little bit off here. Can you tell me, I pointed at middle C and I played middle C, and then I pointed to the C above that and I played that. I said, do those notes sound similar or different to you? And he said, no, I said, oh, sorry, I said that wrong. Which one sounds higher to you? And he said, I don't know. I said, okay. Do they sound the same or different? And he thought about that one for a long time. And then he finally said, well, they're kind of the same, but they're kind of different. I said, well, okay, that's promising. Let's see what we can do with that. Long story short, what I discovered was he didn't understand what it was meant by higher or lower. The words higher and lower didn't make any sense to him. So I explained to him how musical notes are vibrations, and I could even show them on the piano. I hit the strings, and the strings vibrate. That's what creates the sound. And these strings down here at the lower end of the keyboard, creating what we call the low notes, they vibrate more slowly, and these up here at the high end vibrate more quickly. So that's why we say these notes are lower and these notes are higher. That was brand new to him. He had never heard that before. He had taken lessons. He had taken guitar lessons for 5 years, and no one had ever explained that to him.
Wow.
So it's not at all evident necessarily that notes are higher or lower, or that vibrations are higher or lower. You have to have it explained to you for many people. Otherwise, they just don't get that.
Yeah.
So getting back to your question, and I can't remember exactly how you phrased it. Do you remember how you phrased your question? I know you were asking me about vibration, about higher and lower, but I can't remember how you phrased it.
Well, because I was just saying that you're saying all energy is the same. Yeah, it's all energy, and that makes it the same. Mm-hmm. But there's different vibration to that energy, right? So some is love, which is a very high vibration, and we can call it high because it makes us feel good. Mm-hmm. And then there's lower vibrations, like, Well,
and my answer is I agree with you, but I also remember Richie, who taught me that despite the fact that notes and music have different vibrations, they are all the same to him. And that's why I say they're really all the same. They're both the same and different. Just like human beings being both individual and part of the collective. We are both.
Right. Yeah. So you could have, maybe we can say that there's different characteristics to the energy that is the same because it's all energy.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm amused by the fact that you're amused about my idea of energy. Because this is the way I'm looking at it. I'm looking at it in terms of how do people experience it, and how do I experience it, and how do I think about it. And there are a lot of ways to think about it. There are a lot of ways to experience it.
I forget what you were asking before about that. That made me say that. I forget what it was, but anyway. Do you remember?
Right. I have no idea. You're the one. You're the one who thought it, not me. I don't know.
So.
What I do know is this. Here's
love.
what I do know.
We're talking about the energy of love, right?
Yeah. Well, I was asking whether or not you considered energy and love to be equivalent.
Energy and love?
Yes.
To be
yeah. Is energy and are the words energy and love two words for the same thing?
Sure.
Yeah, I think so too.
It's just that love is descriptive, giving a little bit more to the energy, maybe more flavor to it.
Yeah.
Because it's a different word than, say, anger.
Yes. Well, sure.
Resentment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I do think that love and energy are the same. And I think it's actually a very important insight. Because when then fear and energy is the same, and then hate and energy is the same. And like every single aspect of energy that you can call energy and energy would be the same. Truly, any emotion is a form of energy, really.
Yeah.
And that's true.
Yeah.
To me, it's also very useful because now energy ceases to be an abstraction and turns into something more real, more concrete, more substantial, more tangible.
You know what? So I'm going to introduce this to you because you did have a healing session with me and you could feel energy, right?
I did. Yeah. It was quite interesting, quite fun.
Yeah. So I was thinking, like, how would you could even describe the feeling of the energy, which that wasn't necessarily an emotion. It was a physical register of a flow of something, right?
Yeah, it was very hard to describe. I remember we did the podcast shortly after that session, and I remember kind of grasping for words, like, what are the words that I use to describe it? And realizing it was like a lot like trying to describe a color. I don't know how to describe what red is. Red is just red.
Right.
How does it feel? How does red feel? I don't know. It just feels red.
Yeah, because I had a client today, and for her, she was feeling the energy. She was feeling it more through heat and vibration, like tingling. Mm-hmm. But people feel it all different ways. So again, that's kind of the same thing. It's just not calling it an emotion, but there is a feeling that you can, a sensory aspect to it, put it that way. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that was, I mean, it's not the first time I've ever experienced anything like that, but you helped me really connect to this concept and this feeling of energy in a way I hadn't done before, which was really neat. It was very, very tangible. It was tangible in a different way than anything else I'd ever experienced before, and it helped reinforce for me that there were previous times I'd had interactions, and yes, I was actually experiencing energy at those times. I mean, in the past, I was doubtful. I was like, was that really energy? I'm not really sure. Did I just imagine it? What am I feeling there? I don't know what it is, you know?
Right. Because sometimes you just don't know what to make of it.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the cool thing about that session because, yeah, I mean, you were calling it energy. It's like, okay, good. Now I can call it energy. Now I know what that is. That's good.
Yeah. Sensation,
yeah. Well, it does have, not all of it has sensation though. That's the thing that's really bizarre about energy, especially what we might call source energy or spiritual energy, because it shows up in so many different ways. I mean, like for instance, it's possible to get messaging, right? And I have, in my own limited way, I have managed to get messaging periodically, and I can recall times like early, I've told you that my sister's been into this stuff a lot longer than I have. So I can remember early on, she would describe to me, or I would ask you to describe to me what it was like when she got a message. And it was the same kind of thing, the mouth kind of hanging open. How do you describe that feeling, right? Well, now that I've experienced it, I understand why that's so hard, because does it have, is it something I actually see? Well, no, I don't really see it. Is it something that I hear? Well, no, I don't really hear it. Is it something that I can taste or touch or smell? Well, no, not really that either. Now, does it have a vibration? Well, I guess sort of. I'm not really sure. It's an impression. Well, it's not really an impression. It's more like a picture impression, but it's not really that. There's no way to describe it. And yet I did experience it. I have experienced it. So what is it? Well, I don't know.
but you did describe it to the best words that you can come up with it. It's like our language can't always find the words.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But like this, every now and then I'll have where I'm working with a client, and this energy, which I call the energy of love, this healing energy that flows, was just so, I call it overwhelming, because it just makes me cry. I'm like, it's so much love that it's almost like my body can't even hold it all.
Oh, that's nice.
And so why am I telling you that? Because you can feel it in so many different ways. Feel it, sense it, know it. Yeah. And I guess you know it by your reaction to it as well. Cause my client was feeling it big time too. And we were, this is online. This was just like with you, It doesn't make a difference whether people are with me in person or online. That's the love. That's the great thing about energy. It just goes.
Yeah. Well, source energy, that concept alone, I like the concept and I like the wording of it. But as an actual thing, or as an actual experience, or whatever you want to call it, I try to imagine it in terms of it being like water or some sort of a liquid, because then it can, in a sense, it can flow anywhere. And there was one point during the session that you did with me where I was sensing the energy, and it seemed like it was a swirl of energy, like a swirl of particles almost. And I would be hard pressed to say whether I saw it or felt it or touched it or anything like that. But nevertheless, there was a very strong sense of this swirling thing going on there. Well, whatever it was that I was experiencing, however it was I was sensing it, it became really clear to me that swirling stuff could go anywhere. There were no boundaries to it. It could literally just flow anywhere. And the swirling part was part of experiencing that flow, so to speak. So that means truly, if my perception is correct, if what I feel like happened actually happened, then there are no limits to where source energy can go.
And that's why you can send love to anyone who you feel can use it.
And it makes sense. Yeah. Because certainly there are plenty of studies and plenty of experiments and just anecdotal stories of people who have been able to actually, in some physical sense, send love and have it produce an apparent physical result. Well, that can only happen if there's a way for it to get there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's pretty much what I do. I've had people just call me up, text me. I'm having this going, like friends of mine. I'm having this going on. Could you send me some energy? Okay. And then so I sit with the energy and I just imagine just pouring this love to her. And then she texts me back like 20 minutes ago. Oh my God, I felt that so strong, Like, yeah, it's cool.
Well, now that also reminds me of something else. At the beginning of the session you and I did together, one of the things you make it a point to do, which I think is really admirable, you always ask for permission before you take the next step. And at one point you I don't remember how you phrased it, but you asked me for permission to energetically come into me or into my field or something like that.
To read your energy,
to read my energy. And when I said yes, you said, okay, here I go. And as soon as you said that, I literally felt like this, I don't know, it was like having, if it were energy instead of water, it was like having this flow of energy coming into me. It was a visceral feeling, a very strong feeling. And I thought to myself, whoa, what the hell was that?
And you know what? You know what's cool about that, Walt? Not everybody can feel it that easily. So it just shows you how in tune you are, that you didn't even know how in tune you were.
It surprised the heck out of me, I can tell you that.
Yeah.
I didn't know what to do with it, but it was cool. It was interesting. Like, whoa, that's a physical reaction right there.
You know, any energy healer is going to ask you for permission because you have free will. You know, nobody can mess with your energy without you agreeing to it, or mess with it, work with it or whatever. But even people who want, have maybe bad intent. I mean, you're the ruler, you're the master of your energetic domain.
The energetic domain, yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Well, that's also kind of reassuring too, because I can't remember what the name of the two brothers were who created the movie, the Wachowski brothers. That was their name. The two brothers who directed the Matrix movies. They projected a society in which energies were being used quite negatively and quite invasively. So it's nice to know that doesn't actually happen in the real world. That's a good thing.
I mean, I can't say that for sure, but all I know is my experience,
Well, I'm going to choose to believe that for now anyway. We'll see what happens.
Me too. I like it that way.
Say, before we run out of time, I want to make sure we get a couple messages in. These are the ones we do every single time. First one, if you're not yet a subscriber to the podcast, we would really love it if you became a subscriber. And the big benefit to you is you get all these episodes that we create as we create them every single week. We create 11 episodes a week, so there's a lot of stuff coming to your smartphone just because you're a subscriber. The instructions are on the homepage at loatoday.net. It's actually pretty darn simple. You don't even have to go there if you don't want to. Just like if you're on an Apple iPhone, just go to your podcast software. You got a little podcast app, little purple icon built right into the operating system. Click on that, do a search for LOA Today. We'll pop right up. Click the subscribe button, and now you got a list of all the shows as they come in, as they're being created, right to your smartphone. It's a little bit more tricky on an Android phone, but still can be done. All you have to do that's a little bit different is you have to actually install a podcast app, and there are lots of them out there. You do that obviously through the Play Store. Just pick one, whatever one you want to go with, install it. Actually, Google's got one now. But install the podcast app of your choice and then do a search in there for LOA Today, and we pop right up. So please do become a subscriber. It's really easy to do. It takes about a minute. It's free, and you get all this great content. And for those of you who are already subscribers and who have been helping to contribute to this little project we've been doing for the last 2 to 3 months, getting more and more people aware of LOA Today, helping more and more people get their daily dose of happy. Please keep doing it. Put your stuff, keep posting out there on social media that, always listening to loatoday.net, or, go to our page on Facebook and, comment on the page or share it with somebody or whatever. Just keep doing that stuff because it is making a difference. I don't know if I told you, Linda, but in the last two months or so that we've been doing this, we've doubled the listenership.
Wow.
We've doubled it. I mean, 2 months ago, about 2 to 3 months ago, an average one of our podcasts, if it had been out for a week, probably had, 80 to 100 plays so far. And when it was all done after like a month or so, maybe 125 plays. Right now, after a week, it's almost 200 plays.
Wow.
So it's
beautiful.
Really increasing. And we just want to keep multiplying that, and in that way, reach out to more and more and more people so that more and more people can know about this podcast, because clearly we're having a positive effect on people. We want just that, we want that to increase. We want more people to have that positive experience.
What it's all about.
Absolutely. Well, we're completely out of time. I just used it up talking about it all. Before we go, how do we reach out to you if we want a little personal energy work?
You can just go to my website, Love My Life. What is my website? lovemylife.coach.
Oh, there it is. Okay. All right. Been a pleasure. I look forward to talking to you next week.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Take care, everybody. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.